Gentlemen, ladies, and anyone in between, I welcome you all, and today is a good day. Today we get to play with one of the finest low-profile freshwater baitcasters on the market today, and quite possibly ever made in this price point. Now, for you guys out there finding me for the first time, I think you might find I do things a little bit differently. What I like to do is do teardowns, comparisons. I'll compare within Shimano's line and to other reels from Dio or Abu, wherever it sees fit. We go over what it does well, what it does poorly, and when I say poorly, we focus like a laser beam on the bad stuff, and I'll also bring up some head scratchers, which are basically things that are kind of quirky designs, and there are a few on this reel. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And I think I'll start this off by covering, this is kind of contrary to how I normally do it, we're going to cover the good. Now, as far as low profile bait casting reels are concerned, I really can't say I've fished a reel that feels any, and I hate using this term, smoother than this reel. Bait casting reels are very simple in design. You have a main gear that runs a pinion gear. If you can put ball bearings on both sides of that main gear, meaning at the base of the reel's frame and at the top above the anti-reverse clutch, and if you can find a way to support the pinion itself on two ends, both underneath the cast control knob and at the frame down here, you will have yourself an amazingly smooth reel, regardless of whether or not you use tiny tooth main gears, which Shimano calls their micro module. Now, this reel, you can't feel a single thing when you turn the handle. There's nothing. Under load, under no load, there's literally nothing when you're winding in a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a Senko, whatever it is. You just don't feel anything at all whatsoever. That can be said about quite a few Shimano reels. Even some of their aluminum geared reels, that Chronarch has a wonderful feel as far as how silky smooth it is on the retrieve. When you go up to the Metaniums, which is this right here, this is what Shimano brought over. I thought they were bringing over a new design based on the MGL, but they didn't. And it's worth pointing out that I have had to upgrade to brass gear sets on multiple Metanium DCs as a result of them going geary. And we're also going to go over how significant this Metanium DC aluminum gear is in relation to the Bantam. That's where things get pretty interesting when you start looking at what these reels weigh and compare them to other reels such as your Aldebaran. This is their BFS version, which is 4.8 ounces fully spooled, and something like this, which is a Steez that uses aluminum gear, but it doesn't have the tiny teeth. And this thing comes in at around 5.7 fully spooled. So we're going to go over the weight, which is one thing that may keep people from buying this. It comes in at right under 8 ounces fully spooled. And normally, this day and age, I like premium reels. I like really light reels. But this one, for whatever reason, disappears in my hand when I hold it. The only thing I would, if I wanted to complain, which we're going to point out everything, this. It's not a big deal, but if you get grit, whether it's from the carpet of your boat after fish slime gets on your hand, you get some schmoo on your hands and you get some sand or whatnot, when you're palming the reel, I feel this as an edge. That's the only thing I can complain about how it feels in my hand. But if I clean my hand off and there's no grit or no nothing, it's perfect. Shimano could have made this so that way it came up into the front and melded into this chin part here. Other than that, I think it's perfect. In terms of things that it does good, it's an incredibly powerful reel. And I hate really bringing this up as a feature, but there are some bait casters on the market, and again, nothing in the $300 price range is not a powerful reel. Every single $300 bait caster, every single $200 bait caster, pretty much on the market, has good cranking power. You're not going to go, wow, I can surf a fish in because it's an MG. No, it makes no difference. That's a gear ratio thing, and whether or not the main gear and main shaft are supported well. And every reel that's priced at or above $200, even the $100 reels, if they're from a big name brand, they will supply quite a bit of power on the retrieve. This one, for whatever reason, whether it's the big squishy knobs that are found on the Corrado K, whether it's the very solid handle or the ball bearing that's situated up here. It's just everything, it makes it feel very solid on the retrieve. And I hate making this comparison to round reels, but I kind of do get that sensation of fishing my Calcutta TEDC 200 when I'm running spinnerbaits. This is a 6.3 to 1, so it is the lowest gear ratio that they offer. For spinnerbaits, I really love slow reels, like a 5.3 to 1, but this performed beautifully, and I had a wonderful time fishing it. Other things it does very well, it looks great. Look at this from this angle here. Just look at that. Let me get this main gear out of the way. Let's turn it. It's still a little fashion show here. That right there, that's the angle. It looks like a robot. It looks like the robot from the first Thor movie that Loki sends down. Look at that. I think that's badass. I mean, from this angle, it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. From this angle, I think it looks absolutely killer. So looks, I know I hate bringing looks into the equation, but in this instance, when you compare it to this thing here, I mean, this one looks kind of cool too. This looks like it's wearing 1980s sunglasses, like the big blade style. That the only people that wear them now are middle-aged males playing softball. But yeah, I think it's a looker. I think it really does look absolutely beautiful. I think it looks better than the Steez. The Steez just kind of looks like something you don't really look twice at. I guess. Looks like it's got a lot going on there. It looks like meh. And then it looks like something from the front. And then you look at this thing, it's like, okay, I mean business. All right, now, what this does not do well. Really nothing. The only thing this thing doesn't do great is cast certain baits in certain conditions as far as some other reels, like a Corrado K, which is just a monster caster. A T-wing reel, like a Tatula or a Zillion or the Steez SV TWS, or any other free-floating spool shaft reel from Dio, for that matter, and even something like an Aldebaran BFS reel, which is one of these ultralight spools. And if it doesn't cast as well as those reels I just showed you, that would also mean that some of the Abu reels will outcast it in certain situations with certain baits. And the baits that I found that it doesn't do all that great with are very popular. They're Senkos. When I did some casting comparisons on the field, just taking measurements a year and a half, 2 years ago, the one thing that kind of stood out to me was the Shimano Antares outcast everybody by 10 to 15 feet throwing Senkos. And it did so without any drama at the thumb, no overruns or backlashes, but it beat the MGX Extreme 2 by 15 feet. It beat the Steez SV TWS by 10 feet. And every other category of bait, whether it be crankbaits, rattle traps, spooks and such, it got smoked. So this reel, having a different version of that SVS Infinity Break, does not perform as well throwing weighted and unweighted Senkos. When it comes to long-range presentations like spooks, it also gets beat. But for spinnerbaits and jigs, big heavy 10-inch worms with quarter-ounce, half-ounce weights ahead of them, blade baits, frogs, anything you can think of that is not a super long-range bait, it does a great job, albeit it doesn't cast as fluidly as some of its competition. And the other thing I want to make mention of, line has a little bit to do with it. This is Berkley Fireline Ultra 8. You can see it's kind of stained brown. That usually means it's starting to get broken in. It's starting to absorb some of the sediment that comes through in the waters that you fish, and it starts to soften up a little bit. It's very wiry at its onset. And with the positioning of the level wind guide, so very close to the spool, and if you look here on the Bantam, you can see that level wind, not the Bantam, the Aldebaran, you can see it's pushed way out. Same thing with the Corrado K, same thing with the Metanium DC. it is pushed way, way out. It's almost in a different zip code in comparison. You see that? You can see it on the right. Get those spools nice and even. You can even see that level 1 support bar is further out. Use that as an indication. It's not the end of the world, but I did notice that on some wiry lines like Fireline or 14-pound fluorocarbon P-line Halo, to be exact, it did kind of, it gives you that sensation. This is how I like to describe it. It's almost like when you're in a RX-7 or an RX-8 and you wind it out in first gear, and you hear that just the revs bouncing off the rev limiter. You get that kind of sensation as the line's coming off the spool. Every time it switches direction, it almost goes if you don't have that level line centered perfectly. And that does throttle down the cast a bit. Now, with that being said, the casting isn't awful. It's just not as good as some of the other ones out there that are great casters. It's a very good casting reel. The brake is very nice, but I also think that the positioning of the level wind kind of makes it more difficult to just set and forget at a long distance brake setting. So I find myself putting the brake at 2, and then instead of going down to 2 or even down to 1 or going up to 3 and just bouncing around, I find myself more often than not sitting at 3 to 4. And if I do go down a bit, things kind of get squirrely quickly. Whereas with the Corrado K, with an Antares, a DC, a SV spool Daiwa reel, or just a Mag 4C Daiwa reel, the mag brake in this, you have quite a bit of room in between some clicks until you get down to a very low brake setting where things are starting to get squirrely anyway, and then you go one down and it's chaos. This one goes from comfortable to chaos very quickly, which is something I don't like, because I like to, if I switch baits, say if I'm throwing a Megabass 110 and then I switch to a Rapala Shadowrap Shad, I can go down in brakes because I know that the Rapala bait's going to kind of throw more like a dart versus a Megabass, which can kind of waver at the midpoint, and you kind of want a little bit more braking to kind of keep it straight. This reel kind of doesn't do that all that well. Again, that's mainly using 14-pound fluoro and Fireline Ultra 8 14-pound test. Now, that aside, everything else, top of the heap. It feels great. It's solid. They're making a big deal about the core solid body, and I'll show you what that is. I know you've been staring at this reel and just listening to me ramble, but I'm trying to give you guys as accurate as a representation of this reel as possible without you guys actually being on the water fishing it. This is the side plate. This is the brake, so to speak. Everything's self-contained here. You can adjust the dial here and go into here. Do not take this apart. This is a pain in the ass to take apart and put back together. It's not worth the time and effort. This is your spool. This is an MGL spool. It's a 150 size that goes by capacity. Has 4 brakes. I have them all turned off right now. Usually I fish them with 2 on, both opposed. As the spool spins, these brakes go out. That leg on the inside presses up against that titanium nitride coated brake ring. That's how the brake works. Very similar to the Corrado, only how this attaches to the frame is different. This is far superior. One thing to note, and I'll show you firsthand because I know a lot of guys reach out to me about the Corrado having issues with it. And if I can get this back out without wasting any more time, we're probably going to speed this up. If you, oops, tighten the spool tension adjustment knob all the way down, just like so. See that? It's all the way tight. No, I lied. It's not yet. There it is. It's all the way tight. There's no free spool at all. Right? You can still take the side plate off, make a brake adjustment, and put the side plate back on without having to mess with your spool tension. The Corrado K, if you are the kind of person that likes using the spool tension adjustment knob as a method of braking or assistance to slow the spool down or prevent overruns, A lot of times if you want to adjust anything here or swap out a spool or just clean, you have to back this off, because the way it locks into the side plate, it can't have that much pressure or side load put on that side plate. So this is a nice little plus. I definitely do like that. And one of those head scratchers has to do with that side plate. Now, see this little drain hole? We're going to go ahead and pop that out, all right? Take notice of the O-ring. See this O-ring right here? I'm not really certain if it's doing anything to keep water from getting anywhere. More or less just a nice way to smoothly add pressure to something to keep it in place. I like that actually. But if you see, that O-ring goes all the way beyond. See that black right there, that black in the center of that hole right in here? That's the O-ring. It goes all the way down. So it's down into here. So if water does get in here, which it will, there's no doubt. Anytime you have fishing line on a reel and you're reeling it in, water's getting everywhere. It's getting in here. It's getting around the flange of the spool. It's getting everywhere. That's why bait casters in saltwater tend to live short lives if you don't pay too much attention to them and they take some abuse. So I don't know how this is going to drain. No issues yet. I mean, fishing this in the rain, just fishing this with braid, and braid holds a lot of water when you kind of retrieve it. You'll notice you'll see all sorts of colored dye usually accumulating down in this area of your reel. That's because as it hits that level line, it squeegees the water out of the line, and it'll take some of that dye and let it run down in here. So that's kind of a strange, kind of a little quirky design, because if water gets into this area here, past that spool flange, it has to go in these holes, I think. I don't know. So the water really, see if you can see the hole down in there. It's gonna be tough. Okay, so the hole is right here, and then we go over past it with the O-ring, and yeah, so that was kind of funny. The other thing, as far as the head scratcher is concerned, that I noticed is you look underneath here. That is the screw cap that covers the plastic level wind pawl. I don't care that it's made out of plastic. I don't care it's not stainless. It makes no difference to me at all whatsoever. It's going to last. It's going to perform. But they went through all this trouble to kind of keep this concealed so you don't see anything and whatnot. Why couldn't they, and I've already been inside this reel, so I know how this is all laid out, and it's laid out perfectly. Why couldn't they extend this further out and just use a different method of capping this off? Like, you're using the O-ring on the side plate here, right? To keep this in place. Without that O-ring, it will just freely move. Why not have like a little door that slides in with an O-ring that doesn't require that huge cap? You can just use a little pick or a small flathead bladed screwdriver to pop it out. That way you can release the pawl and work around there. And you don't need that huge cap. And judging by the size of the actual pawl itself, they could have saved some room by going with a shorter pawl. So it's one of those things where they probably could have saved some room down in here, kept the chin piece the same size, and extended it further out, all the way out to here. I mean, all the way out. I mean, that would be a solid 1/4 inch, and that would be a significant improvement in casting performance and feel. So that kind of had me scratch my head. Another little design quirk which I kind of liked, and it kind of takes a shot at 13 fishing. If you see here, right above the drag star, let me get this that way so it focuses. Right above the drag star, that little reflection right there, that's the click plate for the drag star. And we're at that time now where we can kind of start taking the reel apart, so we'll do that. I think this is a brilliant way of doing the whole clickety-click of the drag star. It truly is. It really is a superior design to pretty much anybody else. this little click plate here will most likely kind of come off when you take the handle off. And it does the same exact thing that the 13 fishing does, only it's kind of self-contained. No way for it to get out. Very similar to the 13 fishing design, but just better. I got a kick out of that. I was like, hey, this is familiar. Ah, man. So now we can go ahead and dismantle her. Ever since working on that Tranks 400 and 300, anytime I take apart a Shimano reel, I always take note as to whether or not they include Belleville washers or cup washers. These washers here, when you lay them against each other, you can change the configuration depending how fast you want that drag pressure to rank up. It's not going to change your max drag, but if you orient them like nested C's like this, it'll put more pressure at less and fewer cranks than if you had them opposing each other like this, because you're gradually pushing one and the other and it kind of loads up equally. Whereas if you have them nested like this, they kind of become one, and you got to kind of fight them and push on them more to get them to go. So that pressure ramps up quicker. And if you look here, that's a ball bearing mounted on the outward side of the drive shaft. I don't think a magnet's going to get this one out. Now it's at this point we can go ahead and remove everything. Very simple. And I get so many questions about what kind of bait casting reel would I use or recommend for inshore saltwater specs, reds, etc. And I can't tell you guys how many times I said, well, I don't really know. In my neck of the woods, there's just really no species of fish that I target where I would use a reel of this size out in saltwater. I target, larger bluefish, striped bass. I'm not a fluke or flounder guy. I'll run into some big weak fish. I think maybe 7 years ago I ran into spike weak fish, but every other weak fish that I do run into happens to be around the 8 to 10 pound mark. My biggest is 14 pounds. And I use 400 size Tranks 500s for chunking, that kind of stuff. I just don't use these little guys. That being said, this spring I made some changes and I started fishing them for some pretty big striped bass, and it was pretty funny. I didn't use this one because I didn't feel this would be a reel that would handle the salt very well, because it has really nothing to mitigate salt water from getting inside like the Tranks 300 would, and it's just too fine of a reel to want to destroy in the salt. Now, yeah, whether or not they use their corrosion-resistant ball bearings or not, or how many pounds of drag it's capable of putting out, that means nothing to me. I don't want to basically take a pocket knife to a sword fight, and I really put a pounding on this reel because no ball bearings can hold up to the salt. So I was doing a little bit of that kind of inshore, nearshore stuff with some small reels just to experiment. And this reel is not one that I would recommend taking out. Keep this one in the freshwater stuff. Keep this one running really nice and purdy, and you'll enjoy it for a long time to come. Now, real quick, I want to point something out, and I wish I pointed it out earlier before I started dismantling the reel, but it's important, and it's worth mentioning in regards to whether or not this would make a good reel for light saltwater use. And it has to do with the tolerance between the spool's flange and the frame itself. Now, if you look here, you can see how narrow that gap is. That's a very tight tolerance. And if you compare that to this reel here, which is an Aldebaran BFS specifically designed for ultralight lines and ultralight lures, we're talking lures down to 1/32 of an ounce. The Aldebaran suffers an issue with 4-pound test or lower fluorocarbon or monofilament, where it can get trapped and bound up between that flange and the frame, which will basically ruin your line. It will weaken your line if it binds up, and it happens often to the point where I had to step up to kind of a wiry braid, which is Fireline Ultra 8 6-pound test. The tolerance found on the Bantam MGL can get you in trouble if you're fishing the beach and you get any sand on your hand, on your thumbs, and it makes contact with that area. It will get stuck. It will cause binding. It will cause scratching. It's kind of why a lot of guys love the Abus, and if you fish the beaches, if you do any chunking with conventionals, you don't want stupidly tight tolerances in that area because sand will cause massive headaches. So, with that being said, I would kind of shy away from ever taking this on any kind of sandy beach, even a jetty. That's just my opinion, but it's something I recommended through past experiences with reels that were a little bit too fine in that department, and it did cause issues for me. This goes way beyond that. There we go. Now, right here we have kind of an interesting design, not often seen in any baitcaster, let alone this guy here. If you look at the base here, this ball bearing is secured in place by a screw. Most of the time there is a clip at the top and this kind of sits in the bottom, maybe a clip at the bottom. I like the fact that they add a screw, and when you have this in place here, you see this lean? That, it barely moves. 90% of the baitcasters in the market they have a huge amount of lean at that location. This reel is one of the rare exceptions. It truly locks itself very tightly in place. Okay, yeah, there's a little bit of lean. I didn't want to, I felt like I kind of over-exaggerated how little lean there was. Compare that to an Abu, compare that to a Daiwa, compare that to other Shimano reels. And there's a fraction in this. Now, in order to get to the level wind, you have to push this rod out, just like so. And now you can kind of lean that forward. And you take your screwdriver, and see if you can't kind of turn it a little bit, and it kind of comes out a little bit on its own. Let's see if we can use just our fingers. I pushed it. There we go. This is your plastic level 1 pawl. Zero wear. I can't see any wear on this at all whatsoever. It's still brand new. Very much so brand new. One thing I do like about it is you can see debris. When you do take it out and you want to clean it, you can definitely see if there's any debris. And when you take a look at this, so moving along, you have the plastic pawl, you have the aluminum level wind worm itself. If you look here, there's a washer on the opposite side. And if you can see down in there, no. There is a fiber washer on the opposite side here in case this ever runs up against it. And that'll bring us to the thumb bar. It is a single spring, but boy does it feel nice and chunky. If you look here, if you press on the far side of the thumb bar, see there's no lean, you can't really see any lean or rock. Very solid. Just like most Shimano reels. Shimano does this very well. Let's see if we can get a little bit closer. And it, the release when you turn the handle, very solid. You're not going to have any issues casting large baits and maybe having it kind of slide forward on you and possibly popping out or popping into gear mid-cast, which would be bad. And that being said, the only other thing to go over, which I'm going to leave here, I don't feel like going down in here. This is just your X-ship ball bearing, which is the ball bearing sized to fit this part of the pinion gear, which really does an excellent job of completely isolating that pinion, so it's not just running on this and a spool shaft, or part of the spool shaft if it's a free-floating design. It literally gets supported at the base and at the top, just like what you'll find on a spinning reel that has a ball bearing support below the anti-reverse clutch and above the frame's pinion support. So it's very strong in design. You have the ball bearing in the side plate here, which is sized to fit this. And when everything is running, I don't think you can see that because... Oh, wait. Okay, yeah, you can see the pinion right in here. See that? So the pinion is supported by two ball bearings. Me personally, that is one of the biggest deciding factors in terms of what makes a reel buttery, liquidy smooth over the long haul. They don't even have to have this kind of fancy schmancy tiny gear teeth to be a smooth reel if they incorporate the dual ball bearing supported pinion, because when you have a ball bearing here and a ball bearing at the top outside of the anti-reverse clutch, you now have that handle shaft perfectly locked in place, meaning the gear, when you're fishing under a fishing drag, 4, 5, 6, 7 pounds, everything is going to be solid, in line, in plane. The pinion has nowhere to go because it's isolated. The only way it can go is in and out. In and out. No wiggle, no lean, under any kind of load. The teeth will have to start shearing before they separate. That's the beauty of this design. So when you're shopping for a reel, you got to spend big bucks on Daiwa to get this design. The Tatulas kind of have that, having a flat washer at the top. The Tatula's pinion is kind of sheared clean, and then the shaft runs through it, and then there's a washer at the back that kind of goes up against the base of a bearing. Quantum Accurist, the PT, has dual ball bearings. This has sort of that design with their NCBs, but not quite. So that's actually a feature I look for if I'm buying a new bait caster. Like if I want a new bait caster to do everything with in freshwater, that is what I look for in terms of a feature for the dollar. Does it have it? Does it not have it? I kind of want that because I, in my experience with a lot of different bait casters over the last 20 years, I find that really is a nice design that really does translate into something useful. Shimano just happened to give it a name called X-Ship. Daiwa, I don't think it has a name for it. Other companies don't even have a name for it. So that kind of gives you an idea. So, yeah. So this is the reel torn apart into pieces. And what we wanted to see regarding the aluminum drive gear out of the Metanium DC is how much does it weigh in comparison to this guy. So we have a nice clean and orderly table. We're just going to make a big mess of everything. There we go. Because we don't care, right? We've done this enough. It's not our first rodeo. We don't need parts in order. All right, so we have grams, right? That's a G. 5.66. Two-tenths of an ounce. Wow. So you pick up quite a bit of weight. And this is the 6.3 to 1 gear ratio gear. Imagine how much more weight would be in this gear here. The silver one, the aluminum one. is the, what is it, the 8, whatever the, I don't even know what gear ratio this thing is. HG is. It's not this gear ratio anymore. It's got 6.3 brass gears in it now. And the reason why I bring that up, I think at this point, I would rather, going forward in reels that I buy, no longer buy a reel that has aluminum gears in it. I've gone through 2.5 gear sets of this specific gear. And I can't remember ever burning out. Well, I've burned out gear sets before, but that takes years. But these were going out inside of a month or two. Pulling out snags, all that kind of bass fishing stuff. You hook a lily pad with braid. What are you doing? You're taking a wrap, try to pull it out, break, no, can't, thumb the spool, pull it, boom. So it's something to do with the micro module gears and the tiny gear teeth. It's the only thing I can think of. I've never sheared a tooth. It looks fine. This was never one of those polished ones either that, I took the Dremel to and polished it for super tuning purposes. But I have had issues. And when you're telling me all I got to do is go up like a 1/4 ounce to get smoother meshing feel, just an all-around smoother running reel, as far as I'm concerned, the only super duper smooth reels on the market that use aluminum gears are either high-end Daiwas, which this will rival an Antares. The smoothest of this, you can't tell the difference between this reel and this reel, aluminum versus whatever. But other companies that use aluminum, Abu Garcia, this company 13. They have a different feel. The guys try to make excuses. Oh, it has a connected feel. They try to give fancy ways of describing it, connected versus whatever. It doesn't feel as good as brass, hands down. There's only a couple of reels in the market that equal it, and it takes a lot to do so. Surprisingly, that Chronarch MGL is super smooth. That CI4 plasticky reel is somehow, I don't know, it's got some magic in it that makes this feel like liquid. Yeah. But with that being said, if you can go out and justify the near 8 ounces fully spooled, I think this may well be one of the best reels at its price range. There aren't too many. There are some Daiwas, not many in the States. Abu Garcia's, the MGX and the Extreme 2, they don't have enough drag pressure to be used in such an all-around way as this could be used, but they may be able to handle finesse fishing better than this one. So different use scenario there. When you compare it to a Daiwa Zillion, buy the Zillion for its casting, buy this for, and again, the Zillion's a tank too. They're very rugged reels. They do everything very well. This just feels better under and retrieve. If that's what you want, go with something like this. This, to me, reminds me of a reel that you would use the original Corrados for. Like the Corrado E's, the D's, the green Corrados. That's what you buy this reel for freshwater. I'd be more inclined to recommend somebody using a Corrado K in saltwater than this reel. Do that, kind of weird thing with the drainage. And there really not being much protection on this side. Oh, you know what? I wanted to bring up something else as well. The drainage locations here. Most reels, including Shimano, have 2 downward facing drain ports here and here. Not sure if it's a big deal or not, but they put one on the back and only gave one here. So are these sitting upright to drain? Drainage becomes an issue in saltwater. X-ship ball bearings, any way, shape, or form in saltwater, need some sort of protection. And sometimes with Shimano reels, since the shaft goes all the way through that pinion, you have to be doubly sure never to get any grease anywhere in the shaft at all whatsoever. Because if you get any grease on any Shimano spool shaft or any spool shaft that traverses the pinion in its entirety, we're looking for like this right here, it will slow your spool down to near nothing. So that's worth mentioning there. And again, that's that X-ship pinion support bearing right here, which is ultimately directly exposed. Then you have the little spring down in here, which I'm really not entirely sure what it does. If you back off the spool tension all the way, there still is some knock side to side. I thought that was supposed to put a load on the outer race of the ball bearing, so no matter what spool tension you have, if you back it off a lot, you don't get that drift. But it didn't. It didn't do that. So I was a little surprised to see that. Not sure if that's a one-off scenario or not, but it's just worth mentioning that it didn't have the effect that I had thought and have experienced on some other reels in the past. The anti-reverse clutch mechanism found in this, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I'm going to go with indifferent. Some of the saltwater duty reels use one that has a kind of a bronzish colored plastic. This one uses white. I don't know what the differences are. So, and getting this out will probably require some force that we're not going to do because it's a brand new, perfectly good reel. And drag. I like how they did it here. If you look, you have yourself a massive drag washer below the main gear, and you also have a relatively large drag washer on the top. Lots of friction. Lots of reel companies out there really go cheesy and tiny on this drag washer down below. This is what drives your drag. Your main gear is what drives your drag. Think of the main gear as the spool on a spinning reel. So when a fish is taking line, this is one thing that's very important for you guys out there that are blowing out your reels. The pinion locks to the spool like so. Okay? See how those little teeth grab that pinion? All right? So when a fish is taken line, it's going to turn the pinion. All right? That's going to turn the drag on the shaft. This top plate here is keyed to the handle shaft. This bottom plate here gets keyed to the base of the handle shaft. Those two are locked firmly in place. This washer can turn, the main gear can turn, and this top washer can turn. What turns? That's up to physics. But if you apply too much drag, that pinion is going to put too much of a load and you're just going to start shearing teeth. Which may be what was going on here. I don't know. With the aluminum micro module gears. So, and again, if you guys have seen my videos in the past, I don't care about micro module gears. I like them on the Tranks because it's a huge reel and they're still big teeth. There's a lot of metal. They're taller gears. But on these kind of things, you can't tell me that this non-micro module gear feels worse than every micro module gear. No, not even close. This feels just as good, if not. I don't care. The dial calls it Hyper Digigear, Digimon Monsters, Digibeer. Doesn't matter. It's equal to this. The Antares, it had micro module. This has micro. They're all super smooth. You can't feel any gears or any load. So me personally, I would rather see more meat connecting to the potatoes. Did we just lose it? No. Because no matter what, I mean, just because there's more teeth doesn't mean there's more teeth connected at the same time. I mean, you still get you get some different degrees of contact due to the smaller teeth versus the larger teeth. They always roll in and out of one another. It's not like they're slapping. That's a crappy reel. That's a low quality. Things are moving around. But when everything's locked in place, they roll in and out of one another. So you shouldn't feel the mesh if they're a properly paired gear set. So with all that being said, let's do another quick rundown on just what my thoughts are on this reel. Amazing. Stupendous, great reel. I enjoyed fishing this reel for the last couple months. I've been fishing it almost exclusively. The only reason why I would be pulling out other reels just to get a refresher on what the differences were as far as feel and performance. I did notice that throwing some baits, Senkos for bottom bouncing, I couldn't reach certain pieces of structure that I could with other reels, whether it be a Corrado K or the other reels I mentioned earlier that I've shown, the DCs. I could even hit them with this guy here. This is a 2 centrifugally braked original Bantam 100. And just to give you guys an idea, since we're here, I think I only have one brake installed on it. This is a thumb burner for sure. Look how tiny that handle is. My, how our hands have grown over the last 40 years. This model was from 1979. This was Shimano's first ever Shimano branded bait casting reel. For you guys out there that weren't sure. But, what the hell. We'll take it apart. I think we dropped the wrench on the floor. And they still use the same sized handle retaining nut. How about that? That's consistency. First thing I thought of when I took apart the new MGL and saw the screw at the bottom, I immediately thought to this and how the older reels a lot of times will put a C-clip at the top through a shaft or a screw to keep the handle on. But this time around they did it at the base, which I really like to see. This kind of got caught up on the threads. We didn't want to do any damage. Now this reel is a little bit different. Doesn't use an anti-reverse clutch ball bearing. There wasn't a reel made at this time or this vintage that incorporated that. This reel still fishes very nicely. Just very differently. Casts just like a bait caster casts today if you have the brakes set at very low settings. This is your main shaft support bushing that presses down the drag stack, just pretty much like everything else in this day and age. The only difference is instead of this, and I have that out of frame the entire time, instead of that, you have this. Here's your pinion and main gear, your thumb bar actuation, very Abu-esque from yesteryear. On the base here, you can see these little pins. Those pins right here. Pop this out of place so you can engage and disengage. Brilliantly simple design. They could easily bring this exact thumb bar mechanism back into play if they could find a way to have a lever actuate at a different angle to keep it nice and low, and it would work just as well as they do today. But they don't really need to do that because they have designs and stuff. But it's a good design and it's an oldie. Alright, so I think it's about time to wrap it up. We've been here long enough. I've done my best to stay on topic, which I know it's tough. I get sidetracked a lot. I'm just a fan of fishing and tackle and all the crap that comes along with it. And I have a lot of experience with a lot of different types of gear, fishing different situations. So sometimes it's tough to keep me laser focused on certain things without trying to bring up past experiences. But I guess we'll get back to what I would recommend this reel for. So, for you guys out there, if you're a bass fisherman, you can definitely find a spot in your arsenal where you will fall in love with this reel, hands down. If you're a serious bass fisherman anywhere in the country, you fish at some point a certain presentation where this reel will feel at home. and you won't be missing out on anything, and it would be one of the best reels that you ever fished. Plain and simple. If you want a frogging reel, money, just don't spend the money on the Steez A. You might want to just go with this because you're not throwing frogs over 55 yards, 60 yards anyway. Don't pay attention to that video of the guy with the DC reel claiming a 100-yard cast or 104-meter cast with a frog. Good luck doing that with a 14-foot rod and a tournament casting reel. Good luck. That cast may have gone 60, 65 yards tops. This reel will perform beautifully for frogging. That's what I've been doing a lot with it. Spinner baits, jigs, dragon bottom. It's wonderful. St. Croix rods, which are sometimes tough to balance, and with this day and age, all the premium reels are going lower in weight. This one kind of jumps up a bit. That may play into your purchasing decision as well, because sometimes a 5 or 6 ounce reel just won't get the tip up. And when you're casting and pitching and flipping, when you're pitching and flipping, balance is one of the most important things. That's why a lot of guys still use round reels, because you can just grip them, you can claw them, and they lock in because they're just round with no elongation, and they weigh 8-10 ounces most of the time, so that pivot point's right at your wrist. This kind of offers that in a sense. Other than that, it's just a great all-around reel that if you have the $350 to pop for it, there really isn't much of a variation between MSRP and street price with Shimano gear. I think it's the reel at the $350 price point. I would buy this. If I had to do it all over again, I would buy the MGL over the DC, which is now coming stateside. I think it has a $500 price tag. I think I paid like $360 for it when it came out in Japan. So I'm not sure what that $500 price point's all about from Shimano on that one, but I enjoy fishing this reel so much more, even with the brass gear upgrade to a gear ratio, that I enjoy fishing. I don't like fast reels. I like slower reels. I like how this casts. I don't like the DC brake on this specific DC reel. I think the sound just is brutal. It sounds like a crappy MP3 version of a studio recording from 2003 versus like a high resolution audio. It just sounds cheesy. It's too whiny. It's kind of like me sometimes. But yeah. So to say I like this and how it casts better than this will outcast it distance-wise, hands down. You put it on auto, it'll outcast it with a Senko. It'll outcast it with a lot of things. But I just like how this comes out. I think I like quiet reels now. I think I'm over the whole DC line. I've had, I think, 6 different DC reels. The only DC reel that I want is the Conquest Calcutta and a Trinidad DC. If any of you guys out there, anybody, I don't know anybody who has one that's looking to sell or donate. If you want to donate it, hand out a Trinidad DC of any size. That's what I want. I fished one once, cast it 5 times, and I want one. But they sell for over $1,000 now, apparently. And apparently nobody at the Shimano home office has any as well. Not that they're willing to admit anyway. So with all that being said, for you guys that are still with me, thank you very much. Thank you for every second of every minute you guys spend here. Without you, I wouldn't have any reason of being here. This is going on, almost coming up on, 2 years? A year and a half I've been doing this? 2 years almost? I don't even know. All I know is I got close to 16,000 subscribers. I get 7,000 to 10,000 views every day. You guys, just to give you some stats, you guys average 7 minutes per view, I guess is the best way to put it. It's not a comfortable living, but I can pay my bills off of it. And for you guys out there that the only reason why you use my Amazon and eBay affiliate links is to support me, hey, thank you very much, guys. It quite literally is the only way I can actually stay doing this, just to give you guys an idea. Same thing with the Patreon. I have to do something with the Patreon. I'm not happy with it. I don't like charging monthly. I don't feel right if I go through a lull where I'm not putting out content. That doesn't mean I'm not filming stuff. I'm putting together projects. Something like this. If you go on certain tackle review websites, they'll come out with a review the first week the reel's out, and they'll say it's the greatest thing in the world, blah, 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 this, that. Nah, sorry, I got to put time on it. I got to find what it does good, what it does bad. Nothing's perfect. And, you know, you look at some of the reviews that are coming out on the Concept Z. There was some hate initially on it, and the guys jumped on the hate train and just kept on running with it, when in actuality, it's not a bad reel. It's just not a great $200 reel. I think I've said that before in another video, but that's going to be one of the upcoming reviews. I finally got enough time on this reel. I beat the living crap out of it with big striped bass. I can't tell you how many foul hook carp were on it. Largemouth bass, it did fine with that. Lots of bluefish, you know, jigging out front on the boat, just locking down the drag against 12-pound, 13-pound bluefish. I was expecting some bigger bluefish this year, but we didn't get into them. But it's got a couple thousand pounds of fish on it. It's definitely not a new reel, and it gave up that new reel feeling very early on. But with zero maintenance, and then after maybe 1,000 pounds of striped bass and bluefish, which comes up pretty quickly in certain seasons up in my area, I took the grease out of the reel. I just wanted to see what would happen, and then continued to fish it because I thought it was broken. I thought I damaged the gear set, so I stripped it out just to inspect and didn't see anything bad, and put it back together with no grease and said, you know what, screw it. It's probably going to need a new gear set whether I grease it or not, and it stayed the same exact way for the remaining time I used it. So, and you know, casting, I don't know. I'm not casting on a grass field, my friends. I'm casting at fish, and I can't. Where am I fishing saltwater where an extra 2 yards is going to make a difference? I mean, that doesn't happen because you're never fishing on bluebirds, you know, sunny days, and you know it's always some kind of wind. You know, if it's worth fishing anyway. So it's usually blowing in my face, or my left ear, or my right ear, and that kind of stuff doesn't make all that much of a difference. So the guys that stayed on the hate train did so in error, because for a $200 baitcaster hold up to what it did, yeah, that's pretty impressive. Again, no maintenance. When I do this review, you'll see all the salt buildup on the inside. That's what made me kind of have to come out and be like, all right, I got to change my tune on this thing. Never said it was a horrible reel. Never said it was a bad reel. Felt rickety, but this wasn't a good $200 reel. We got the Corrado K. But it would outlast the Corrado K when it comes to maintenance. So, see how easily, for you guys that are new to my channel, see how easily I can get sidetracked? I mean, you guys are just sitting here staring at a pile of stuff. I'm not even moving my hands on the camera. Do you have any idea how hard it is to do this? This is why, like, I don't do, like, I'm not doing any, like, tutorials on teardowns, because you know how hard it is to go step by step without doing a voiceover and take all the parts and put them in a neat and orderly fashion and discuss them, and this is one thing you want to watch out for, this is how you want to put this back. That's not easy. That takes hundreds of hours. Me just tearing this thing apart and talking smack about it, that's just, I got to start keeping to that, because it's more efficient that way. I did this in one take. I haven't had to back up or backtrack, and I think I can edit this video in less than an hour. Since it's high-res 4K high bit rate, it's probably going to take about 4 to 6 hours to render if it's a 45-minute long video. But yeah. So, once again, guys, I appreciate every second you guys spend here. I mean, I say that a lot. I say that at the end of each one of my videos, and it may sound like it's scripted or rehearsed, but you know, if you're somebody like me who's got a billion things flying through the head at all times, certain things you kind of train yourself to say. I mean, I can't talk fast or quickly or as fluently as Eminem. So when I can get a phrase down pat in my own head, it comes out so much easier. So if you hear things that sound scripted, like gentlemen, ladies, and anyone in between, I could say that without thinking about it, because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say 20 paragraphs down that I'll have to reshoot 150 times if I don't like it. So that's kind of why I stick with that kind of stuff. A little bit of an insight, just to give you guys an idea. This stuff ain't easy. I found that out about a year ago. So I'm rambling now. You guys are probably like, cool, Tackle Advisors is giving some insight. And then the other guys are probably like, shut the up already. So with that being said, take care, guys. Tight lines. I'll see you soon.